everyone, CPO here, and in this video, it's tires. I'm swapping out these 19-inch Pretorias, the factory upgraded Volkswagen wheels, for those. Those are Konig Hypergrams, switching from 19s to 18s. I'm switching out tires as well, going from the Contact Sport 5Ps to the Michelin PS4Ss. So, I'll talk a little bit about where I got them from, why I got them, and a bunch of tips on the way. And I'll give you tips and information in case you're new to upgrading wheels and tires for this platform. I'll talk about things like hub-centric rings, why you will probably need to change lug bolts from the factory ball to the aftermarket conical style, lengths of the lug bolts. I'll talk about wheel spacers. I'll talk about torque sticks. I'll talk about, a couple of things, but tire pressures as well. That's going to be an important one, I think, for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't think about the fact that this tire and these tires don't run the same air pressure. I think that covers it. Let's get to it. All right, so first thing I'll tell you, I got these tires and wheels from Discount Tire Direct. I went to them because I was hoping I could order a wheel and tire package and just have them shipped to me already mounted and balanced. And that's exactly what happened. FedEx dropped these things off at my door, and they're basically ready to go, ready to install. I don't have to take the entire set of wheels and tires and find an installer and pay more money for mounting and balancing. That was included in the price. Discount Tire Direct had both the wheel I wanted, the Konig Hypergrams in a race bronze, and they had the tire I wanted, which was the Michelin PS4Ss in 255/35, 18 by the way. They came packaged well. I was worried about that. No issues with scratching or any problems during shipment. This is my first look. Yeah, they're actually pretty beautiful. Also included in my order were these hub-centric rings. So with Discount Tire Direct, I did get a 10% military discount, which was helpful. On top of that, I used my Discover card and PayPal, and they're doing a 5% cash back right now. And then I also got a Rakuten like $60 cash back bonus. So I saved a couple $100 by ordering online and using a variety of things. So I'll put a link. I don't know if you're familiar with Rakuten, but there's a link in the description. Actually, there's going to be a lot of links in the description, so just go check the description for everything. But it's an easy way to get money back. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, and basically anytime I shop online, if there's a Rakuten discount, I take advantage of it. And Discount Tire Direct had one, so yeah, use that. So I ended up saving a couple $100 off the top of what I was already doing with the wheel and tire package, which was also discounted from them. So lifting up the front of the car on one side gives you the benefit on these cars of lifting up both the front and rear tires, so you can work on one side at a time with just one lift with a jack. I am putting in jack stands just for safety. And I did treat myself to a new little kit here. I like the plastic sheath that will help protect these new wheels. I've always wanted a set of those. Also in there are some torque sticks, which I'll explain here in a minute if you're not familiar with them. So this little doodad here is a wheel hanger. Most useful for installing wheels, but also useful for removing them because it keeps the wheel from falling to the ground while you're removing the lugs. Again, these lug bolts, they don't really hold the wheel on once you take them off. Simple product, super useful. Basically, you screw it in and then use it as a hanger for your wheel. So you'll see me use this during install. I'm taking off my old 10mm spacer. I'm not going to need that. The new set of wheels have an offset, which I don't need that spacer anymore. They're spaced just perfectly. So I did want to see the difference between the old set and the new set of wheels and tires. So protecting my bathroom scale so my wife doesn't yell at me. And let's see here. These are the Factory Pretorias and the Conti Sport tires, and they're coming in at 42.5. Now that's a pretty lightweight set altogether. The Prets are pretty light wheel. Let's see the new ones, the Hypergrams and the Michelin PS4Ss coming at 41.5. So I saved £1 per corner. That's not remarkable, but I do get a wider tire, and hey, at least I'm not getting heavier. That's a bonus. Now these are the hub-centric rings that you need to match the diameter of your wheel hole to the hub on your car. In this case, we're going from a 57.1 hub to a 66.5 wheel. So make sure you get the right size when you get new wheels. And these are designed to just press fit into the back of the wheel. I like the plastic ones. I do know they make aluminum ones. I'd rather just do plastic. I think a lot of people tend to prefer that. While we're talking about things, let's talk about the lug bolts. The factory lug bolts are ball style. You can see the mating surface there. It looks like it got cut out of a round ball. And that's the factory Volkswagen lug. But if you change wheels, you're going to need to get different lug bolts, and you're going to need the conical style or the cone style. And you can see those look like they're cut out of a cone. So dramatically different. And so if you get new aftermarket wheels, you're probably going to need to get new lug bolts. And then the length of the lug bolts matters as well. The factory is 28 millimeter. And I had previously had some 35 millimeters in because of the spacer. But now that I'm not using a spacer in the front, I'm going back to 28 millimeter in the front. And then I'll put 35 millimeters in the rear because I will have an 8 millimeter spacer. I'll talk about that here in a second. So putting my wheel hanger on, and that allows me to just get that wheel and tire up and then hang it into place. And I'm not trying to like physically hold it in place while I thread in the lug bolts. So I hand start every one of the lug bolts. I never start them with an impact or anything like that, even though I will use an impact to tighten them up. And then once I get all of the lug bolts in, I can remove the hanger. Now you don't need to put all of them in. You'll see on the rear, I'm only installing one lug bolt and then pulling the hanger. Now here's where I'm using the torque stick. And I'm using an impact gun to tighten this down. The value of the torque stick is it won't let you torque past, theoretically, whatever torque stick you're using. So this is a 90 foot-pound or 120 Newton meter torque stick. So in theory, I shouldn't be able to over-torque that, which allows me to zip those things on without having to worry about it. So this little set I got came with a handful of them. They came with an 80, a 90, 100, and 110 foot-pounds. And it allows me to just use my DeWalt impact gun safely with my tires. Now I trust but verify, and so I am going back with a torque wrench, a manual wrench, and checking everything. And sure enough, they're all pretty close. Maybe just slightly under, which isn't a bad thing. All right, now I'm going to the rear tire. I'm just going to do for you in this video the front and rear on this side. The only difference with the rear that I'm doing now is I will also be installing a spacer. So I'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, zipping off these factory lug bolts. And again, I'm going to replace them with a longer conical style because I'm using this spacer here. This is an 8 millimeter spacer. And it's designed just to push out the rear tire just enough to sort of flush it out with the back. The front is sort of naturally that way, but the back, you need about 8 millimeters to make it look the same, that flush look. So again, 35 millimeter cone style lugs in the back. Now don't forget the hub-centric ring. Once these are in place, you really don't have to worry about them anymore. You can take the wheels on and off and they should just stay in the wheel. And then right on to the hanger. Here's another tip for you. If you're working on a axle that is not a drive axle, in this case, this is the rear of a front wheel drive vehicle, you can engage the parking brake and that will hold it in place for you so that you can tighten up your lug bolts without the wheel turning on you. So the alternative is to get everything snug down and then set it on the ground so that the friction of the ground will hold it in place. But if you just engage the parking brake, it will achieve essentially the same thing. So you can do the entire job with it off the ground. So this time I just used one lug bolt and now I'm able to remove that wheel hanger and then continue going through and adding in one by one by hand each of the lug bolts. So once I have that done, I can hit it with the torque stick. And again, I'm just cinching them up. I'm going until I feel slight resistance and stopping, and then doing a star pattern to get it snugged down. And then after I get it snugged down the first time, then I'm hitting it a little bit harder and getting it to more of its full torque value. And then also, again, trust but verify. I'll go in with the actual hand torque wrench and verify. And again, they're all pretty close. You know, these are give or take a few foot-pounds. I'm not super picky on that. And then I can get my jack stands and drop this thing on the ground for the first look at the new wheel and tire combo on this car. One thing I did like about these Michelin PS4Ss is they protect the wheel. You can see how the sidewall protrudes past the face of the wheel. That's good to prevent curb rash. So I like that on my Conti Sport 5Ps, and I like that these tires also have that feature. I have a little bit more wheel gap overall. They're a little bit like about an inch smaller diameter tire, but I do think it still looks pretty darn good with my lowering springs. Now let's talk PSI. On your door, you'll see the factory tire pressure, load rating, and size. This is what you want to compare with. You can also find this on the tire, 91Y extra load, and then my new tires are 94Y, a higher load rating, also extra load. I'm going to take that information and go to tirepressure.org and figure out what my new pressure should be. I'll show you a couple options of how to do this. So first, go find your factory load range and PSI that they want you to fill it at. So this was 91XL, and they wanted, according to the door, they wanted it at 39 PSI. That gives me a weight of 1,279 pounds that is supposedly held up by that one tire. So now what I want to do is I want to go to the new tire's load range, which in this case happens to be 94XL, and I'm going to look for the weight this time that matches closest to the weight I found before, and 1312 is just a little bit above, and that equates to 36 PSI. The 1268 is a little bit below it, that's 35 PSI, so somewhere in that 35, 36 PSI range. Now there's another way to do this. Tiresize.com has a calculator where you plug in your old tire information, you plug in your new tire information, and it gives you what it says should be the new PSI. Same answer, 36 PSI. Now if your load range is the same, you'll probably use the same PSI. There's more formal ways to do this by weighing your vehicle and then figuring out load range versus the weight of your actual vehicle, but this gets you pretty darn close. So these came to me from Discount Tire Direct at 39 PSI because that's what Volkswagen specs for my vehicle. So they just fill them up to that by default, which is pretty common. So now what I'm going to do is just go to every tire and drop them down to 36 as a starting point. The good news is with less pressure, it should be a little bit softer of a ride. But these higher load range tires can hold more weight with less PSI, which is why I can get away with less. So yeah, go check all of those. Even if you're not going to change them, go check them all to make sure they're right. And then after that, I'm going for a test drive. What I want to do now is put some miles on the car. Not a lot, but you know, go run around and then come back and double check your torque on the tires. Again, 90 foot-pounds is the torque spec that I'm shooting for on these, and you can see I do have room to tighten them more. The issue is you've got brand new wheels, brand new lug bolts, which is probably the key here, and these are painted surfaces, and you're trying to mate them all together, and you've got spacers in the back, you're trying to get everything mated together, and there's just a little bit of room there. So what I like to do is go drive it around, and almost every time I use, especially with new lug bolts, almost every time I'm able to tighten them down just a little bit more. So don't skip this step. Go drive around, put 20 to 50 miles or so. It doesn't take a lot, and you will find that you should be able to tighten them down a little bit more and still keep the correct torque spec. After that, maybe check them about 200 just to be safe, and then you can not worry about it anymore, generally. But yeah, that's my wheel and tire set. These are, again, the Konig Hypergrams in a 18 by 8.5 with a 43 millimeter offset, and then the Michelin PS4Ss in a 255/35/18. You can see the fronts fill out the wheel well really nicely. They're flush, and with that 8 millimeter spacer in the back, it also brings it out flush, and I think it looks really nice. These tires should be a good mix between dry weather traction and wet weather traction. And I plan to use them as a daily driver, obviously, and then a weekend like autocross or drag strip type tire. So they're fairly well regarded. They do have a pretty good tread wear. They actually have their tread wear 300, which is better than the Conti Sports I just took off, which were like 240. So these should actually last me longer, and they're quite a bit cheaper. So yeah, that's it. That's my wheel and tire install. I appreciate you hanging out for this, and hopefully you learned something. If you're an old dog at this, you probably just rolled your eyes at half the stuff I said, but if you're new, some of this stuff might actually prove to be useful for you. Now you can see here's the rear view. Does widen things out, gives you a nice wide track, and I'm really pleased with how these turned out. All right, everyone, thanks for watching, and as usual, I'll catch you on the next one.